Welcome back to having a look at what codependency is, to identify, to see the symptoms, so you can see whether this is what might be happening for you. So codependency is something that isn't clearly defined, but it is a result of attachment trauma, which is something that happened to you as a child before you were able to do anything about it. And it's basically a relationship model that was taught to you that depends on one person sacrificing for the other person. And then we think that that is how we should be in relationships, and we think that that's what it means to love someone else, okay, to be in a loving relationship, when really self-sacrifice does not match and does not fit into a loving and healthy relationship. In a loving and healthy relationship, you both matter, and you know that it's okay for you to matter too. You know that it's okay for you to have feelings, to have needs, to have desires, to have your voice heard, to get time to be understood, to have your needs met in many different and varied ways that help you feel fulfilled and happy in your life. Okay, but in codependency, it's about sacrificing yourself. It's about inhibiting, repressing, censoring your feelings so that you don't say the wrong thing, so you don't go against the grain, you don't offend someone else. You exist to survive within the codependent bubble, right? Where you play a role and you are not allowed to be fully yourself. You're not allowed to be unapologetically you. Okay, so you have to censor yourself. You're very focused on the outside. That is one of the pillars of codependency that I've come up with in my 3 pillars model of codependency, which just addresses root causes, whereas most people focus on the different symptoms of codependency and how you can eliminate that. I focus on the root cause because, like with weeds, there's no good snipping off the leaves on top because it just keeps growing back. It's like you attack the root, the weed dies off. And that's the approach I like to use too. So the external focus is what I call it, means that you think about what other people want, what they need, how to manage their moods, how to make them less anxious, how to, stop them from getting angry, how to please them. So if you feel like you're really trying hard to please people, you would identify as a people pleaser. It's very likely that you struggle with some codependent tendencies due to this external focus. And as a child, that was really important because you had to keep yourself safe by pleasing your parents. So there's nothing wrong with that. There's no shame attached. There's nothing that you can beat yourself up with because it is just what you were taught to do. And it is a very clever strategy for a child to keep themselves safe. But as adults, obviously, it doesn't work out for your relationships. And that's why it's important that we develop an internal focus. Okay, but that's something that we will come on to and that we'll explain to you later on. For now, we'll stick to the different symptoms of codependency so that you can have a look at what might be happening in your life and how that relates to codependency. So another symptom is that very often you don't really feel lovable and worthy. Okay, so while in other relationships, like business relationships, work, friendships, you do have some boundaries, a sense of worth. You eliminate people who are disrespectful, say inherently disrespectful. In your romantic relationships, it's more like anything goes. You'll be very forgiving and tolerant. You will think to yourself that your partner's difficult behaviors are down to their childhood trauma, their problems, their unresolved problems, and just kind of void it. You'll take it because you were taught to tolerate a lot that isn't healthy and good. Okay, you might have a pride in being able to take it, being able to suffer, being able to doing the hard things, which often pushes you to achieve incredible things in your career, or even like in your business, in different areas of life. Usually a high achiever with some perfectionistic tendencies, because if you don't develop that way, it's almost like you give people more reason to hurt you in some way, to try and shame you, embarrass you, ridicule you, put you down, and you're trying very hard to stop that from happening. People who struggle with codependency are often not very kind to themselves. They have a harsh inner critic. They're tough on themselves. They're very self-disciplined, very self-controlled. But then there are also those phases where in some areas you have no self-discipline or no self-control. So while you might overperform at work or in your career, you might completely let yourself go in terms of self-care, where you don't have time to have a relaxing bath, you don't have time to meditate, you don't have time to check in how you really feel, you don't have time for looking after yourself, and you don't want to. So when people say to you, oh, there's this amazing self-care routine, you're like, yeah, not really interested. And that's because, you know, when you have this external focus that was taught to you, that you have practiced all your life, self-care can feel like another chore, not something pleasurable, because there is no connection to what you want and what you need, to the kind of care that you would enjoy, because you had to disconnect to avoid the pain of not being cared for, of feeling neglected, of feeling abandoned. And so then typically codependents have got something that they do that helps them cover up this pain, and that can be drugs. That's less the case for the people I work with. It's usually work and achievements, and they're very good at that. It can sometimes be things like gambling or sex, risky sex. It can be relationships, where it's more like you go from one relationship to the next, or you date, or it's about being unfaithful within your relationships. So we have got something that we use to almost like seek relief from the pain and the pressure that our coping strategies cause in our life, right? So there are lots of different ways. At the core, we often feel bad about ourselves, have low self-esteem, even though everyone else looking at us thinks, well, if anyone should have high self-esteem, it's you. Look at all your achievements, look at your life that looks so perfect, look at your family, you know, you might have children that you look after really well, even though you don't really know how to look after yourself well, and you think, well, I'm a parent now, this is what I have to do. Or if you look after family members or friends or people in your business, it's so easy to neglect yourself. And I guess the overriding sign of codependency is that we prioritize especially other people over us. What they want is more important than what we want. So sometimes we don't even ask ourselves what we want, and we forget. And people say, oh, do you want Chinese or Italian? You're like, I don't know, you decide, and we put it back. So being indecisive in our relationships can also be a very telltale sign of codependency, a difficulty making choices, feeling that you don't want to share, you don't want to open up to people, that you're okay helping and supporting others, but you're not okay receiving it. Okay, so there are lots of signs of codependency, and why they're important to identify is because they're all blocks to you experiencing epic love, to having intimacy and true emotional connection in your life. Because like I said before, emotional connection requires you to be connected to your emotions, to be emotionally available, emotionally present, emotionally supportive towards yourself and other people. And obviously your partner would have to match that. Being inhibited, not sharing what it is you want because you're trying to avoid conflict. And tension means that you don't make yourself matter in your relationship. But an epic love relationship requires you to matter equally to your partner. Like, I matter and you matter. And that makes a healthy relationship. In codependency, you don't make yourself matter. So you might look for someone who can take care of you, who can really love you, who is emotionally available. But your codependent conditioning will drive you towards people who expect you to do that for them. And you will. You lose yourself in your relationships. You overperform on so many levels. And you never quite get what you want. And therefore it's like one self-reinforcing loop that you continue to follow. And you continue to experience the negative consequences of, you know, feeling unloved in your relationship, of being disrespected, of potentially being abused. And that is something you don't want to continue to happen. There is a different way. You can have an amazing relationship. You can feel confident enough to make your dreams come true, to figure out what you want, to really make your life about you without being selfish or, you know, feeling guilty in any way. But that can only happen when you outgrow codependency. And in my next video, I will explain to you exactly how you can do that.